Fleet Commander Zarthex stood on the bridge of the Imperial Dreadnought, Eternal Dominion, and watched the sensor displays with growing confusion spreading across his scaled features. 50,000 years, the Krethian Empire had maintained the most comprehensive database of every spacefaring species in the known galaxy. And in all that time, they had never once encountered a vessel that wasn't already cataloged in their records. Until today, the object that appeared on their sensors was small by Imperial standards, and its design was utterly foreign, with strange angular surfaces and what appeared to be primitive chemical propulsion systems, yet somehow it had crossed into Imperial space without triggering a single early warning. Beacon hailed them in all standard languages. Zarthex commanded while his communication officers worked frantically at their stations. Bridge crew tried 47,000 different linguistic protocols and broadcast them across every known frequency band, but the mysterious vessel continued on its trajectory without any response whatsoever, as if it couldn't hear them, or perhaps simply didn't care to answer. Zarthex felt his chest plates tighten with irritation because in his 3 centuries of service no species had ever ignored an Imperial hail and lived to regret it all. Ships moved to intercept formation. He ordered and watched as 3 full battle groups consisting of 12 dreadnoughts, 36 cruisers, and over 100 support craft moved into position around the small vessel. An unknown ship was perhaps 1/10 the size of his smallest escort craft, and yet it showed no signs of fear or even acknowledgement, as the massive Imperial fleet surrounded it from all sides, with enough firepower to crack a planet fire warning shots across their bow. Zarthex commanded while expecting the usual sequence of events, where the primitive species would panic and either surrender or attempt a futile escape before being disabled and boarded. Weapons officer triggered 2 plasma bursts that streaked across the void and passed within mere kilometers of the strange ship's hull, but instead of stopping or changing course, something impossible happened. The small vessel suddenly accelerated at a rate that made the sensor officers gasp in disbelief, because the gravitational forces involved should have turned any crew inside into paste against the bulkheads, yet the ship moved with perfect precision. In less than 2 seconds, the unknown vessel had repositioned itself, and something on its hull began to glow with a pale blue light that the Imperial sensors couldn't properly analyze. Energy spike detected. The science officer shouted, but his warning came too late. A beam of pure white light erupted from the mysterious ship and struck the dreadnought Triumphant Victory directly amidships, and for a moment nothing seemed to happen. Then the entire vessel simply came apart, not exploded or burned or broke, but came apart at what the horrified sensors registered as a molecular level, as if every single bond holding the ship together had simultaneously decided to stop existing. 12,000 crew members aboard the Triumphant Victory died instantly and silently as their ship dissolved into its component atoms. Bridge of the Eternal Dominion fell into shocked silence, while every officer stared at their displays with expressions of raw disbelief. Because in 50,000 years of recorded galactic history, no weapon had ever demonstrated that kind of power. All ships opened fire. Zarthex roared while his voice cracked with a fear he hadn't felt since he was a newly hatched cadet. Entire fleet unleashed everything they had, with plasma cannons that could melt continents and missile barrages that could devastate fleets, and particle beams that could slice through battle armor like it was tissue. Every single shot either missed completely as the small ship danced between the attacks with impossible agility, or simply dissipated against some kind of defensive field that the sensors insisted didn't exist. The unknown vessel fired again, and this time 2 more dreadnoughts came apart with the same horrifying precision. Retreat. Zarthex screamed while abandoning every shred of military protocol and pride, because whatever this thing was, it wasn't something his fleet could fight. The surviving Imperial ships engaged their faster-than-light drives and fled while leaving behind clouds of atomized metal that had once been the pride of the Empire. The mysterious vessel didn't pursue and didn't fire again, but simply continued on its original course, as if the entire engagement had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. In the silence of the bridge, Zarthex watched the sensor replay and noticed something that made his blood run cold. The unknown ship had been broadcasting during the entire battle, and when the communications officer finally managed to decode the signal, They discovered it was some form of artistic audio composition with rhythmic patterns and melodic structures. Species had been playing music while they casually disintegrated. 3. Imperial dreadnoughts, get me command headquarters immediately, Zarthex ordered while his hands trembled against his command throne. The face of Supreme Admiral Cothran appeared on the display, and his expression shifted from irritation at being disturbed to horror as Zarthex delivered his report. Scare. Telling me that a single, unidentified vessel destroyed 3 dreadnoughts, and you don't even know what species crewed it. Cothran said slowly, "It's not in our records, Supreme Admiral," Zarthex replied, and those 6 words seemed to hang in the air with terrible weight. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Krethian Empire had encountered something completely unknown, and that something had just demonstrated it could destroy their most powerful warships with contemptuous ease. "I'm ordering a full intelligence sweep of that sector," Cothran stated, while his scales had gone pale with worry. "Find out where that ship came from and what species built it, because if there's a civilization out there with that kind of technology, and we don't know about them, he didn't need to." Finish the sentence because both officers understood the implication perfectly. Krethian Empire's entire power structure was built on the assumption that they knew everything about everyone in the galaxy and that they possessed the most advanced technology in known space. If both of those assumptions were wrong, then everything was about to change. As Zarthex looked at the sensor data one more time and focused on the trajectory the mysterious vessel had been following before the engagement. Computers traced it back through multiple star systems to a small yellow star in an unmapped region of the galactic spiral arm, where, according to all their records, nothing of significance existed. Track that ship and find out where it's going, he ordered, while knowing that the answer to that question might determine the fate of the entire empires. The Eternal Dominion limped toward the nearest repair facility. Zarthex couldn't shake the feeling that his civilization had just made a terrible mistake. They had fired on something they didn't understand, and now whatever intelligence guided that vessel knew the Empire existed and knew that the Empire was hostile. In the cold calculations of military strategy, that was possibly the worst possible outcome. Somewhere in the unmapped regions of space, there was a species with weapons technology that made the Empire's greatest achievements look primitive, and now that species had every reason to consider the Krethian Empire an enemy. The thought kept Zarthex awake for many cycles afterward while he waited for the other boot to drop. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never assembled with such urgency in living memory. Representatives from 43 major civilizations filled the massive hall while their holographic projections flickered with anxiety, and their translated voices created a cacophony of concern that echoed off the crystalline walls. Scholar Elmora of the Sethian Collective watched the proceedings from her observation pod and tried to make sense of the chaos unfolding before her. She was a xenorchaeologist by training with over 6 centuries of experience studying the rise and fall of galactic civilizations, and she had never seen the council in such a state of panic. The Krethian ambassador stood at the central podium with his scales dulled by stress, while he played the sensor recordings from the fleet commander's encounter for the 7th time. 3 dreadnoughts gone in under 4 minutes. The ambassador stated flatly while the holographic display showed the impossible dissolution of Imperial warships. No distress signals and no debris fields, because there was nothing left to leave debris, and we have absolutely no idea who or what destroyed them. Of Orlaxian? Delegate raised multiple appendages in agitation and spoke through her translation device with a voice that buzzed like angry insects.
Ow.
How is this possible when the Krethian database supposedly contains records of every spacefaring species in the galaxy? The Krethian ambassador's neck frills flared with embarrassment, but he maintained his composure with the discipline of a trained diplomat. "We are attempting to determine that exact question," he responded while avoiding direct eye contact with the accusatory delegate. "Our intelligence services have begun the most comprehensive search in our history, and so far they have found nothing." Velmora had been recruited to the investigation Team 3 cycles earlier, and the findings from her preliminary analysis were troubling enough that she had requested this emergency session. The council speaker recognized her with a gesture, and she activated her own holographic display while Trying to organize her thoughts, I have examined the recovered fragments from the destroyed dreadnought triumphant victory. She began while her display showed microscopic imagery of the wreckage. The weapon used against the Imperial fleet operates on principles that shouldn't be possible according to our current understanding of physics, and it disassembled the target ship at a quantum molecular level. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber while several delegates consulted with their scientific advisors. The hull materials we recovered show exposure to temperatures exceeding 15 million degrees. Velmora continued while highlighting specific data points. If these fragments exist in a stable state, which means the attacking vessel has developed materials science far beyond anything in our combined databases. She pulled up another display, showing the propulsion analysis, and this is where her findings became truly disturbing based on the maneuver recordings. The unknown ship accelerated at rates that would require it to have somehow negated inertia itself and the energy requirements. For such movement would normally require a stellar-scale power source, yet the vessel showed no conventional reactor signatures. The Galactic Council's chief scientist, Ancient Matherian, whose species had been studying physics for 20,000 years, stood slowly from his floating platform. Are you suggesting this species has developed technology that violates fundamental laws of nature? He asked while his translated voice carried a tone of skepticism. I'm suggesting they've found ways around laws we thought were absolute, Velmora replied carefully, while knowing how her words would be received as she activated the final piece of evidence, and this one made the entire chamber fall silent during the engagement. The attacking vessel was broadcasting an audio signal, which we've analyzed extensively, and it appears to be some form of artistic expression combining rhythmic patterns with melodic harmonics. The recording played through the chamber speakers with strange sounds that were unlike any music the assembled species had ever encountered. It had a driving beat and complex layering and emotional resonance that felt almost aggressive in its energy. They were playing music while they destroyed our ships, the Cretheon ambassador said quietly, while his voice carried a mixture of horror and fascination. What kind of species treats combat like entertainment? Velmora had spent cycles pondering that exact question, and she had developed a theory that terrified her. I don't think they considered it combat, she stated, while every eye in the chamber turned toward her based on the tactical analysis. The unknown vessel made no evasive maneuvers until after the Imperial fleet opened fire, and even then, its responses were measured and precise, as if it was being careful not to cause more damage than necessary. She pulled up the trajectory data and highlighted the path the mysterious ship had taken through Imperial space. It never deviated from its original course, and after the engagement, it simply continued on as if nothing had happened, which suggests this wasn't an invasion or an attack, but rather a warning, interrupted the Vorlaxian delegate, while her compound eyes gleamed with understanding. They were telling us to leave them alone. The implications of that statement settled over the council like a cold weight, because if the mysterious species had casually swatted aside 3 Imperial dreadnoughts as a warning, then what could they do if they actually decided to attack? We need to know where they came from, the council speaker declared, while their translated voice carried the authority of their position. I'm authorizing unlimited resources for this investigation, and every member civilization will contribute their intelligence assets over the following cycles. The investigation expanded into the largest coordinated intelligence operation in galactic history. Every database was searched, and every archaeological site was re-examined, and every prohibited archive that civilizations had kept hidden for millennia was reluctantly opened for inspection. Teams of specialists traced the unknown ship's trajectory backward through multiple star systems while following the faint traces of exotic particles its propulsion system had left behind. The trail led to a small yellow star, designated as G2V7743 in the Imperial catalogs, with a notation that read primitive electromagnetic emissions detected, but no spacefaring capability confirmed when long-range probes finally reached the system. What they found made the entire investigation team stop breathing. The third planet from the star was teeming with biological activity and covered in sprawling urban centers that lit up the night. Sighed like a constellation, but more concerning was The orbital infrastructure they discovered with dozens of space stations and industrial facilities and what appeared to be shipyards. Constructing vessels of various sizes, how did every survey miss this? Velmora demanded while reviewing the probe data with growing disbelief. Probe controller was a young Cretheon technician who looked terrified as he pulled up the historical records. According to our files, this system was last surveyed 100 cycles ago and was marked as pre-industrial with no space presence detected. That's impossible, Velmora stated, while calculating the timeline in her head. No species goes from pre-industrial to advanced spacefaring. Civilization in 800 cycles, and certainly not with technology superior to ours, but the evidence was undeniable, and as more probe data came in, the mystery only deepened. The species inhabiting the planet appeared to be bipedal mammals with no remarkable physical characteristics, yet they had somehow developed technology that made the galaxy's elder civilizations look primitive by comparison. The final report that Velmora submitted to the Galactic Council was perhaps the most disturbing document she had ever written in. She outlined 3 possible explanations for what they had discovered, and none of them were comforting. Either this species had been hiding their true capabilities for centuries, which suggested a level of deception and patience that was frightening, or they had experienced a technological advancement so rapid that it defied every known model of civilizational development, or worst of all, they weren't native to this region of space at all, and had come from somewhere beyond the explored galaxy. As she sealed the report and transmitted it to the Council headquarters, Velmora looked at the data one more time and focused on the linguistic analysis her team had managed to extract from the electromagnetic signals. That species called themselves humans, and their world was named Earth. She repeated the words to herself while trying to commit them to memory, because something told her that these names were about to become the most important in the galaxy. The age of comfortable certainty was over, and the Galactic Council was about to learn a hard lesson about assumptions. Ambassador Thelanora had conducted first contact protocols with 17 different species over her long career, and she approached each one with the same careful methodology that had earned her the title of Premier Diplomatic Agent for the Galactic Council. The massive diplomatic vessel carried every peaceful symbol known to galactic civilization, while broadcasting friendship messages in all standard languages as it approached the coordinates of the third planet orbiting the yellow star. She stood in the observation deck, watching the blue and green world grow larger on the view screens, while her team of linguistic experts and xenopsychologists prepared for what should have been a straightforward cultural exchange were receiving a response, her communications officer announced. While his tentacles worked across the control interface with practiced efficiency, message came through in a language the translation matrix needed several minutes to properly decode. But when it did, the content was surprisingly direct. This is Earth Defense Command, and you are approaching restricted space, so please identify yourselves and state your intentions. Thelanora felt a small flutter of concern, because most pre-contact species either panicked or expressed wonder when they first encountered galactic civilization, but these humans sounded almost businesslike. Transmit the standard greeting, she ordered while her team activated the holographic display that showed peaceful imagery and cultural exchange symbols. The response came back faster than she expected. We acknowledge your peaceful intentions, and we're curious about establishing communication, but we'd appreciate it if you maintained your current distance until we've had a chance to discuss this internally. Her xenopsychology specialist leaned over with his scaled brow ridged in confusion. They're asking us to wait while they discuss whether to talk to us, he said slowly while processing the unusual response. Most species at this development stage are desperate for contact. Thelanora had to agree, but she ordered the ship to hold position while the humans conducted whatever internal deliberations. They needed 3 cycles pass before the humans responded again. And when they did, they transmitted coordinates for a meeting location on one of their orbital stations. Station itself was impressive in a crude sort of way with modular construction, and what appeared to be rotating sections for artificial gravity. When Thelanora and her team transported aboard, they were greeted by 5 humans who wore matching dark blue uniforms with various insignia. Pachesta. The lead human was a female with dark skin and hair that had been cut short in a style that seemed practical rather than decorative. Welcome to Unity Station, she said while extending her hand in what the diplomatic database identified as a human greeting gesture. I'm Commander Sarah Chen, and I'll be coordinating our discussions. Thalanora returned the gesture carefully while noting how firm the humans' grip was despite their relatively small size. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I bring greetings from 43 member civilizations. She began with her rehearsed speech. We come in peace to welcome humanity into the greater galactic community. Commander Chen smiled, but the Lenora's empathic senses detected something that felt like amusement rather than awe. We appreciate that, Ambassador, and we have a lot of questions about the galactic community, as you call it. The initial discussions took place in a conference room that was surprisingly well appointed with comfortable seating and refreshment stations. Stelliana began with the standard presentation about galactic history and the benefits of joining the council, but she noticed the humans taking extensive notes and occasionally exchanging glances with each other. So the Galactic Council has existed for 50,000 years, one of the human scientists asked while reviewing his datapad. And you maintain comprehensive records of all spacefaring species in this region? That is correct. The Lenora confirmed while feeling pleased that they seemed interested in the scope of galactic civilization, which makes us curious. Commander Chen interjected while her expression became more serious. How did you miss us for so long, and why did your ships fire on one of our research vessels 3 cycles ago? The question hit Thalanara like a physical blow because she had been carefully avoiding that topic while hoping the humans weren't aware of the incident. There was a misunderstanding, she said carefully while choosing her words with diplomatic precision. Fleet Commander Zarthex believed your vessel was an unknown threat. Your fleet commander destroyed 3 of his own ships while trying to attack a university research craft. Another human interjected, and this one wore different insignia that suggested military rank. We lost 7 graduate students and 2 professors when they had to make an emergency jump to escape. Thelanora felt her respiratory spiracles constrict with shock because, according to the Imperial report, the human vessel had destroyed 3 dreadnoughts without taking damage. The research vessel survived? She asked weakly. Barely, Commander Chen stated flatly while her eyes held something cold and calculating. The students managed to activate the emergency protocols and their advisor got them out, but they burned out half the ship's systems doing it, and we're still not sure if some of them will recover from the psychological trauma. The xenopsychologist on Thalenora's team looked confused and consulted his datapad before speaking. Our records indicate the human vessel destroyed 3 Imperial dreadnoughts with advanced weapons technology, Commander. Chen actually laughed, and the sound had no humor in it. They disabled your ships because your fleet was shooting at them and they panicked, she explained while bringing up her own holographic display. This is the Curiosity 7, and it's a civilian research vessel crewed by university students studying stellar formation, and the weapons your people detected were actually geological survey equipment that the students modified to create a defensive field. The display showed the vessel in question, and Thelanora recognized it from the sensor recordings, but seeing it described as a student project made her feel physically ill. We were told it was a warship, she said quietly while her entire diplomatic framework began to crumble. It's a university research craft, Chen repeated, while her tone suggested she was losing patience. And the fact that your empire apparently can't tell the difference is concerning, and we haven't even reported the incident to our actual military because we considered it a tragic accident. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud, because if what the humans destroyed was considered an accident, then what could their actual military do? Thelanora tried to regain control of the situation by moving to the next phase of first contact protocol. Regardless of past misunderstandings, the Galactic Council would like to offer humanity provisional membership status, she stated while activating the standard membership contract. This would grant you access to galactic trade networks and shared technology databases and protection under Council law in exchange for adherence to established territorial boundaries, and we're not interested in provisional membership, Commander Chen interrupted while her expression remained neutral. We'd be willing to discuss mutual recognition as sovereign equals with full diplomatic status, but we're not accepting any kind of subordinate position. Thalenora blinked in confusion, because in her 17 previous first contacts, not a single species had rejected
council membership.
I don't think you understand the benefits of joining galactic civilization. She tried again while pulling up economic data. The technology sharing alone would advance your development by centuries. One of the human scientists leaned forward with curiosity evident in his expression. What kind of technology would you be? Sharing exactly, Thelonera brought up the standard offerings while feeling confident this would sway them. Faster than light communication and advanced medical treatments and fusion. Power generation. The humans exchanged glances, and several of them smiled with that same amused expression she had detected earlier. We already have quantum entanglement communication, the scientist stated casually. Our medical technology is based on genetic manipulation at the cellular level, and we stopped using fusion power 40 years ago. Because matter-to-matter reactors are more efficient, the conference room fell silent. While Thelonera processed what she had just heard, you've developed antimatter power containment. Her chief scientist asked with disbelief coloring his translated voice at standard on most of our deep space vessels. Chen confirmed while seeming confused by their reaction. The rest of the meeting deteriorated from there with the humans, politely but firmly rejecting every aspect of provisional membership, while asking pointed questions about the Council's legal authority and territorial claims. When Thelonera finally returned to her ship, she felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. Her report to the Galactic Council was perhaps the most difficult document she had ever composed in. She detailed how humanity had rejected membership and how they possessed technology equal to or exceeding Council standards, and how they seemed utterly unimpressed by galactic civilization. The final line of her report would haunt her for years afterward. The humans are not seeking to join us, she wrote while her hands trembled slightly. They are evaluating whether we are worth their time. The Galactic Council chamber had transformed from a place of orderly governance into something resembling a war room with constant updates streaming across dozens of holographic displays while analysts worked frantically to piece together the emerging picture of Humanity. Council Security Director Vexahan stood before the assembled representatives with 3 of his 4 arms, gesturing at the data. While his career of 8 centuries in intelligence work had never prepared him for what he was about to reveal. We have a problem. He began without preamble, because the situation had moved far beyond diplomatic niceties, a significant problem that suggests we fundamentally misunderstood the threat level humanity represents. He activated the first display, showing a timeline that stretched back over 300 cycles 2 cycles ago. We believed humanity had achieved spacefaring capability within the last century based on their electromagnetic emissions. Vexahan explained while the timeline highlighted key dates. We now know that assessment was catastrophically incorrect. The display shifted to show surveillance data from dozens of different systems across multiple sectors of the galaxy independent. Merchant vessels have been reporting unusual encounters for the past 50 cycles. He continued while highlighting specific incidents. Ships appearing on sensors that don't match any known configuration and then disappearing before proper identification could be made, and unexplained sensor ghosts in restricted military zones, and unidentified vessels near archaeological sites that vanish when approached. A Krethian military observer stood with his scales flushed dark with anger. You're suggesting these were all human ships conducting covert surveillance of the entire galaxy? He demanded while his voice carried dangerous undertones. I'm not suggesting it, Vexahan replied flatly, while activating another display that showed compiled sensor data. I'm confirming it because our analysis teams have cross-referenced all the reports, and the ship configurations match. Human design aesthetics, and more importantly the unusual propulsion signatures, match what we detected from their research vessel. The chamber erupted in shocked conversation while representatives argued and shouted questions and demanded explanations. Waited for the chaos to subside before delivering the next revelation. It gets worse, he stated while his expression showed the strain of someone who had slept very little in recent cycles. 3 cycles ago, we dispatched archaeological teams to conduct surveys of frontier worlds looking for any evidence of prior human presence. The holographic display shifted to show images from an excavation site on a barren moon in the outer fringe. Territories, this is Kepler 4 for to be, Vexahan explained while the images showed carefully excavated structures. A lifeless world that's been uninhabited for over 12,000 cycles, according to geological surveys, but when we dug beneath the surface, we found these. The images showed artifacts that were unmistakably manufactured with clean lines and precise construction. The materials are consistent with human metallurgy and the design patterns match their current aesthetic preferences, but carbon dating puts these artifacts at over 15,000 cycles old. Scholar Velmora stood from her observation pod with her usual academic composure, completely shattered. "That's impossible," she declared while her voice cracked with emotion. 15,000 cycles ago. According to our own observations, humanity was barely developing written language on their homeworld. So how could they have artifacts on a world 300 light-years away? We have 3 possible explanations, Vexahan stated while pulling up another set of data. Either humanity developed temporal manipulation technology, which would explain the paradox, or they seeded multiple worlds thousands of years ago, which suggests they're far older than they. Claymore, he paused because the third option was almost too disturbing to voice. Or they'd been lying about their origins entirely, and we have no idea where they actually come from. The Mytharian chief scientist activated his floating platform and moved to examine the artifact data more closely. "Have you attempted to question the humans about these findings?" he asked while his ancient eyes scanned the information with practiced efficiency. "We tried," Vexahan confirmed while his tone suggested frustration. Their diplomatic response was to politely suggest we might be mistaken about the dating methods, and they neither confirmed nor denied human involvement. Another display activated showing economic data that made several of the merchant guild representatives lean forward with intense interest. "Our economic intelligence division has been monitoring human industrial output," Vexahan continued while graphs and charts filled the air. "Their manufacturing capacity is growing at a rate that defies conventional understanding, and their industrial output doubles approximately every 18 cycles." A trade representative from the Vorlaxian Confederacy stood with all her appendages quivering, "doubling every 18 cycles." She repeated slowly while her translator conveyed her shock. "At that rate, they'll exceed the combined industrial capacity of the entire Council within 200 cycles, 147 cycles to be precise," Vexahan corrected while his expression remained grim. "That's assuming their growth rate doesn't accelerate, which based on current trends it will." The council speaker raised a hand for silence, while her translated voice carried the weight of authority. "What about military intelligence?" she demanded while clearly dreading the answer. Vexen activated what would prove to be the most disturbing display of all. "We managed to intercept a fragment of human data transmission 3 cycles ago," he explained, while the display showed translated text and mathematical equations. "Our cryptography teams have been working to decode it, and what they found suggests that the humans are casually discussing projects that we consider theoretical impossibilities." The text scrolled across the display showing casual conversations between human scientists. One entry discussed modifying the gravitational constant in localized space. Another debated the ethics of converting brown dwarf stars into mobile power stations. A third outlined preliminary calculations for weaponizing microscopic black holes. "These read like science fiction," the Mytharian chief scientist stated while his voice carried a mixture of fascination and horror. "But the mathematical models are sound, and some of them are more elegant than our own theoretical frameworks. They're not theoretical to the humans," Vexahan corrected while pulling up additional intercepted communications. "Based on context analysis, they appear to be discussing active research projects with multiple references to experimental results in prototype testing." The weight of that revelation settled over the council like a suffocating blanket. "We also intercepted references to something they call the," Vexahan added while activating a star map, which suggests they have settlements beyond their home system. "But despite deploying our entire surveillance network, we cannot locate these colonies." The star map showed the known galaxy with thousands of systems marked and cataloged. "They're hiding entire colonies from us," the Cretheon military observer stated while disbelief colored his words. "Not hiding," Velmora interrupted while her scholar's mind worked through the implications. "They're just better at stealth than we are at detection, which means they've had decades to observe us while we remained completely unaware of their presence." decades to study our weaknesses. The military observer added darkly, while his combat training shaped his interpretation. The council chamber descended into argument again. While different factions debated whether humanity represented an immediate threat or a potential opportunity, Vexen watched the chaos with a heavy heart because he had one. Final piece of information that would end all debate, he activated a new display showing long-range surveillance data from the edge of explored space 4 cycles ago. One of our deep space monitoring stations detected unusual activity beyond the galactic rim. He stated, while the room gradually quieted to hear him, we sent a probe to investigate. And what it found was a human vessel of enormous size, conducting what appeared to be mining operations on a neutron star. The image showed a ship that dwarfed anything the Council had ever constructed with industrial equipment that was harvesting material directly from the surface of the collapsed stellar remnant. The energy requirements for that operation exceed the total power generation of most member civilizations. The Matherian scientist calculated while his expression showed pure academic awe, and they're doing it in a region of space. We've always considered too dangerous to explore. Vekuzahan nodded slowly while pulling up the final image the probe detected. At least 15 other human ships in that region before it was discovered and destroyed. He continued while showing the last transmitted frames, but not before it captured this. The final image showed something that made every being in the chamber stop breathing. It was a structure of impossible scale being constructed in the void. Between stars with dimensions that suggested it was larger than most planets, we don't know what it is. Vexahan admitted while his voice carried defeat. We don't know what it does, and we don't know how long they've been building it. But based on the construction, progress visible and archived, probe data from that region, they've been working on it for at least 50 cycles. 6 cycles had passed since the initial encounter, and Fleet Commander Zarthex stood once again on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. While watching developments that would have seemed impossible such a short time ago, the frontier systems were falling away from the Empire, not through conquest or rebellion, but through quiet economics and careful diplomacy that left the traditional power structures helpless to respond. Report from the Tarsize sector, his intelligence officer announced, while her voice carried resigned acceptance of bad news. 3 more independent systems have signed trade agreements with human commercial interests, and 2 of them have requested human defensive support. Zarthex felt his scales tighten with frustration, because this was the 15th such report in the last cycle alone. The humans had arrived in these frontier regions, not with warships and demands, but with merchant vessels, carrying technology and fair trade terms and genuine offers of partnership within cycles. The independent worlds that had spent millennia under imperial influence were eagerly embracing humanity as a better alternative. The Empire is losing control of the outer territories, his strategic advisor stated flatly while updating the galactic map. Red zones indicating imperial authority were being steadily replaced by blue markers showing human influence not losing control. Zarthex corrected while understanding the distinction was important. We're being outcompatted. The humans had proven frustratingly effective at offering exactly what each world needed. Most agricultural worlds received advanced farming technology. Mining colonies got better extraction equipment. Scientific outposts were granted access to human research database. A lot of it came with no demands for subservience and no requirements to join their systems and no threats of military action. It was the kind of soft power the Empire had never needed to develop, because they had always relied on military superiority to maintain order. Sir, we're receiving an urgent message from Imperial Command. The communications officer interrupted, while his expression suggested the news. It's not good. The Emperor is mobilizing the Grand Fleet for a demonstration of force in the frontier regions. Zarthex felt cold dread settle into his chest because this was exactly the wrong response, but he understood the political pressure the Emperor faced. When does the fleet deploy? He asked while already knowing he would be part of it 2 cycles from now, and you're ordered to take command of the forward elements. The mobilization of the Grand Fleet was an impressive sight that should have reassured anyone watching that. The Krethian Empire remained the supreme power in the galaxy. Over 3,000 warships assembled in the Imperial home system, while representing the accumulated military might of 50,000 years of galactic dominances. Galactic dominances Arthex commanded the vanguard, consisting of 500 capital ships and their supporting craft, while they prepared to jump to the outer reach sector where human influence had grown strongest. Plan was simple and had worked countless times before when dealing with upstart civilizations. Jump into the region and demonstrate overwhelming military superiority and make it clear that continued expansion into imperial interests would not be tolerated. The fleet activated their faster-than-light drives in perfect coordination and emerged in the target system ready to make their statement. What they found waiting made Zarthex's blood run cold. Human vessels were already in position around every major installation in the system, with defensive formations that suggested they had known exactly when and where the Imperial fleet would arrive. How did they know? His tactical officer whispered while scanning the enemy positions there, predicting our movements with perfect accuracy. The human fleet was smaller than the Imperial force by a significant margin, but their positioning was flawless, and their technology radiated confidence. Communication channel opened without the Empire initiating contact. Fleet Commander Zarthex, a human voice said in perfect Cretheon, while the translation was unnecessary. This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the United Earth Defense Force, and we've been expecting you. Zarthex gestured for his communications officer to respond. This is an Imperial demonstration of force and territory that falls within our sphere of influence, he stated while trying to maintain diplomatic protocol. We request that you withdraw your vessels. Admiral Webb's holographic image appeared on the main display, showing a human male with gray hair and eyes that held no fear. With respect, Commander. The independent systems in this region have requested our protection, and we're honoring those agreements. Webb replied calmly, We have no desire for conflict, but we won't abandon our commitments. You're outnumbered 3-1. Zarthex pointed out while his tactical displays confirmed the numbers. Are you really prepared to fight the entire Imperial fleet? Webb smiled, and the expression sent chills through every Crethian officer who saw it. Commander, we've been monitoring Imperial fleet movements throughout your entire territory for the past 50 cycles, he explained while activating his own tactical display. We know the position and status of every significant military asset you possess, and we've planned for this exact scenario with 17 different response strategies depending on your approach vector. The human tactical display showed real-time positions of Imperial ships across dozens of systems, including vessels and supposedly secret locations. How do you have this information? Zarthex demanded while his voice cracked with shock. We've been watching you, Webb stated. Simply the same way we've been watching everyone, and we've developed countermeasures for every weapons system in your arsenal and identified infrastructure vulnerabilities in your supply chains and mapped out alternative diplomatic approaches for every world currently under Imperial authority. He paused to let that information sink in before delivering the final blow. You're not outnumbering us 3-1, Commander, because you're looking at less than 5% of our actual fleet strength. And the vessels you see here are sufficient to neutralize any aggressive action. You might take. Zarthex felt the floor of his certainty crumble beneath him. You're bluffing, he said while knowing in his heart it wasn't true. We don't bluff, Webb replied flatly. But we also don't want bloodshed, so I'm going to offer you something unprecedented. Another display activated, showing surveillance data that made Zarthex's respiratory spiracles stop functioning. It showed Imperial fleet positions updated in real time and communication intercepts from high-level military channels and strategic analysis documents that should have been absolutely secure were willing to share this intelligence with the Empire. Webb offered, while his expression remained neutral, not as a threat, but as evidence of good faith, because we want you to understand that we've already achieved strategic information dominance, and continuing to treat this as a military competition will only result in your defeat. What do you want? Zarthex asked, while abandoning all pretense of diplomatic posturing. A treaty? Webb answered. Immediately mutual recognition of sovereignty and non-aggression guarantees, and open trade agreements, and we're prepared to offer something in return. New display activated, showing star charts of regions beyond the explored galaxy. There are other civilizations out there, Commander, Webb explained, while highlighting specific locations. Advanced societies that your Empire never encountered because they exist beyond the regions you've explored, and some of them make our little dispute look trivial by comparison. Zarthek stared at the star charts. While processing the implications, you've made contact with civilizations beyond known space? He stated while his mind raced multiple civilizations, and some of them are interested in meeting the Galactic Council under the right circumstances. Webb confirmed we're offering to facilitate those introductions and share our exploration data and provide technology assistance in exchange for peaceful coexistence. The offer hung in space between the two fleets, while Zarthex understood he was witnessing the end of an era the Krethian Empire could choose to fight and likely lose against an opponent that had already outmaneuvered them at every turn, or they could accept the new reality that humanity represented a superior power that was being surprisingly generous in victory. I need to consult with the Emperor, Zarthek said quietly, of course. Webb agreed while maintaining his calm demeanor. We'll wait. The negotiations took 3 cycles while various factions within the Empire argued and raged, and ultimately accepted what could not be changed, the treaty that emerged recognized humanity as a fully sovereign power with rights equal to any empire, while establishing trade frameworks and cultural exchange programs and mutual defense consideration. Sharch was present when the Emperor sealed the agreement. While watching his sovereign sign away millennia of assumed superiorities, the human delegation departed from the Imperial homeworld. Zarthex found himself in a quiet observation deck watching their ships depart. Ambassador Thelanora joined him. While her expression showed similar contemplation, "We spent 50,000 years believing we were the peak of galactic civilization," she said softly, "and then in less than 100 cycles humanity showed us how wrong we were. What bothers me most is how gentle they've been about it," Zarthex admitted, while watching the human vessels accelerate toward deep space.